I just want to use my royale today to demonstrate, because the royale has the F sharp resonance and the low B flat resonance, which the oboe I usually play, the B series copy Larray, doesn't have. And I think most oboes do have the the F resonance and the low B flat resonance. So I think it'd make more sense to use the royale to demonstrate. So yeah, let's go ahead. I also want to make a point here that many may disagree with, but that's okay. And that is that I believe the playing tests are much more indicative than the cigarette paper tests when it comes to adjusting your oboe. Now the cigarette paper tests are where you take your cigarette paper under each key and adjust it that way. I think, that's perfectly fine if you're very familiar with that oboe. But in general, I've seen that adjusting a lot of different people, from adjusting a lot of different people's oboes, I've found the playing test to be more indicative in a way, because every oboe is a little different. Every mechanism on every oboe is just set up a little different, oboe to oboe, So I remember I was adjusting one of my friend's oboes in undergrad, and I went to my teacher, and Miss Stroman, and I said, so-and-so's oboe, I really had to crank this screw hard for that to seal down there, and it failed the cigarette paper test. In a sense, it failed it in the sense that, I had to make that secondary key really much maybe tighter than I was used to, but that's what worked on her oboe. And Miss Stroman nodded her head. She said, yes, some oboes are like that. Every oboe is a little different. So we can't make too many generalizations, and I think that's why the playing tests are so great, is because it's really you're adjusting the oboe for its individual needs, more than just by a certain rule, right? I mean, of course there are rules to this, but just wanted to make that point. So I'm just going to go over the playing test today for that reason, and not the cigarette paper test, because I hardly ever use them. So I wanted to start with I just want to play kind of the repairman's, what it's called, the repairman song. It's something that I think Miss Duvas or whoever came up with, and it's just kind of a way of, in a very flowing manner on one stream of air, checking all the basic major adjustments on the oboe. So here's the repairman song. You can just watch my fingers. Oh, there's one that needs help. Okay, so there's the repairman song. So I want to show you what I'm doing. So the first thing I'm doing, I'm not going to go over what is primary, what is secondary, this and that. I just want to go over the playing test, because honestly, if you really just focus on what wobbles, and if it wobbles, tighten it, or if it's too, if you're really just adjusting to check if something feels tight, just see, okay, loosen it until it wobbles and then go back. Okay, what does that all mean? Let's see. Let me show you. So first, just play a B natural. And then just to get make sure these two little small keys between, the three major keys on the top joint, just to make sure these two little baby keys here are not sticking or something, just play a C a couple of times. And then use your middle finger and ring finger on the left hand while you're playing a B natural, after kind of, getting them unstuck or whatever, just in case. Just while playing a B natural, just tap these lightly. Sorry, that was me accidentally touching this. That doesn't count. If none of those wobble, it's fine. It's good. It's not leaking. But just if something feels tight in the oboe, yeah, just make sure it's not too tight. So which screw do we go to? We go to this screw right here. If you see these three screws as the shape of an L, it's in the angle, right in the angle of the L, the second screw here. So this screw right here is actually used to what I call screw number 1, this screw out here that's slightly more on the outside, away from the keys. This one is used to just give more or less play, what we call play, to the F sharp key over here, which is important. If that feels too stiff and you want to loosen that up, I actually could give this a little more play. Yeah, then I can give it more play, slightly. Okay, but that's not real adjustment most people really do very often. So I'm starting with right here, screw number 2, this one right here. So this is the one I was just testing. So I'm gonna screw in lefty, loosey, righty, tighty. Okay, so I want to loosen this a little to see if I can get it to wobble a little, just to make sure that I'm not over tightened, and then I can always go back and tighten it a little once it starts wobbling. Okay, so okay, so everything is, basically fine, but let's see. What if I were to loosen this screw a little? Right, this one. I loosened it a tiny bit, and just do it by like 1 minute on a clock or 2 minutes at most on a clock. Be very, very careful and very incremental with it. You don't want to go too far. And now do you hear that there's a slight wobbly sound, like oh, whoa, 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 whoa? That means it's wobbling or buzzing, and that means the pad is leaking a little. So that means it's too loose now. So now I'm gonna move it back just a very small amount. Again, just move it back. So that was pretty in place. I'm just doing this, as if you're doing a general checkup. And I play the C a couple of times just to make sure I'm unsticking these, because sometimes, it's just like resetting these keys just in case, so I get an accurate reading, okay? Somehow I still feel like it could be just a tiny bit more. I hardly felt like I moved anything. And now this next one. Play a B flat, and with your middle finger, tap this baby key between the A and the B while playing a B flat. Tap that. If it doesn't wobble, great. And then let's just make sure it doesn't it isn't too tight. So this is this key. This is in this L, this is the top screw. I call it screw number 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So let's just loosen that a little to the left to see if it can wobble a little. Because what we want is for it to be as loose as possible while still sealing and not wobbling. That'll have the oboe play the freest. See? So that's what we wanted, to see where it started wobbling. So it was basically perfect. So it didn't need to be unscrewed, but I was just checking, right? To make sure it wasn't too tight. So, whoa, you hear that? Whoa, 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 whoa. We don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this back to the right a little. Just like 1 cent, right? Yeah, it's basically fine. I don't even feel like I'm moving it at all, but I'm just making sure. Somehow I still feel like it could be just slightly tighter. Just slightly. You don't want it to be tight. Too tight. I'm moving it like half a minute on a clock or something. And that's just from experience. As you keep doing it, you start to feel it more and more. But it was pretty well in adjustment. If I had left it, it probably would have been fine. So now, let's do the next one. So now, or you could just come in on the F sharp, right? Play a low F sharp. And use your pinky finger to put down the G key, and then use this ring finger to tap this baby key on top of the G key. Observe if that wobbles. If it doesn't, great. Now let's just make sure it's not too tight. So this corresponds to this screw right here, which I call screw number 4, which is located just like close to the G key, so it's very easy to locate. Let's just unscrew this a little and see. So I just kind of, again, just to reset that pad to make sure it's not sticking or anything, that key, I just keep playing the B flat just to make sure. Even though you don't hear a wah wah wah, I can feel it buzzing under my finger a little, which means that it's still a little loose. So it's not always where you have to hear a wah 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 sound to that it's too loose, okay? It can be too loose if you feel a little buzzing. When you tap the key, I'm tapping this key, I feel a little buzzing while I'm playing the low F sharp, which means that it is slightly loose for what it should be. So I'm gonna move it just 1 minute on a clock. I still feel it could be just slightly, and this is just from experience, right? Just half a minute on a clock. Now that feels good to me. Now let's go on to the next adjustment, which is screw number 5, which is right here. This screw right here. And I'm going to play a low C and then tap a A flat while I play that. Sometimes I just kind of play around on the oboe first whenever I get to the lower joint, just to... Because sometimes you don't really hear it the first time you do it. Did you see how I didn't really hear it the first time I did it? But then once I kind of played around... and then settled into it, then I heard it. That's what I mean. Sometimes you just have to play a little in between to reset the mechanism so things aren't sticking or, you know, lying to you, basically, when you're checking. Because now we hear the wobble. The first time we did it, we didn't, right? Did not hear it, right? So that's telling me that this screw 5 is a little loose. Some people like a little bit of wobble on this. I just don't. I feel like I can feel the low notes feeling shallower when I... So, okay, this screw moves very easily, so I have to be very careful that I don't over adjust it. Different screws move more easily than others, right? And I just want to make sure I didn't over adjust, so... And if a screw moves so easily like that, then sometimes it helps to melt a little beeswax and just glob that on the screw a little, just a little bit, so that it doesn't move so easily. But I should do that to this oboe, but this isn't my primary oboe, right? So I've been a little lazy. Yeah, so I went back a little too far, so I'm just gonna, again, move this back. It's just kind of a back and forth sometimes to get it perfect. That's fine now. And you can also check the side E flat while you're at it, which corresponds to this key and this screw right here, right? To see if that is too loose or heavy. And we can hear some wobbling, so we can see that that's a little loose. So I'm going to tighten this screw right here, which is the E flat hole, right? Where the, so. Let me tighten that a little. You see what I'm doing? Tightening that a little bit to the right, righty-tighty. now we don't hear the wobble. Excellent. Now, let's go to these guys right here after that. I tend to check the A flat and the E flat together while playing the low C, even though that's a little out of order. But now let's check this area right here. So on an oboe that has an F resonance, you're gonna check the F resonance after this. So play a low D and just lightly tap while you're playing the low D, this little key right here. This is the F resonance key. It's not on the B series oboes, but it's on practically every other oboe, right? So that's why I'm using the Royale today to demonstrate. So if you're on a B series oboe, you don't have to worry about checking this adjustment, but on most oboes, yes. Okay, so play a low D. And to reset that a little, you can play a forked F every now and then just to reset this key to make sure it's not sticking and that you're getting an accurate reading. And now this key needs to be pretty light, right? So on most oboes, but I don't do the cigarette test so often. So really, I just wanted to, again, just seal but as lightly as possible, right? So that it doesn't make any it's not making any wobbling sounds, but you want to make sure this isn't too tight, right? But you don't want it to wobble. So basically, it's like any other adjustment I would do. That seems to be okay. Now if I were to, now the screw to adjust this though is right here. So if you just follow this key up, it's right here. This is the screw, okay? To adjust this F resonance key, okay? So let's do that. Let's just see. Okay, if I make it too loose, I'm just making sure it's not too tight, right? So I'm gonna loosen it a little bit. So that's not too loose, so maybe I could go a little further. Let's see. Sorry, you can hear my parents talking upstairs. Do you hear that makes a wobbling sound now? So now I want to go back. So I loosened it right to the left, so now I want to inch it back to the right. Okay, very small increments. Okay, so there we did that. Okay, it's just still a little bit, I'm gonna barely do anything, like as if I'm not even moving it, but just, you know, just a slight bit, just to make sure. And that feels fine to me now. Okay, you don't want that to be too tight, but you don't want it to wobble either, right? Or it's leaking. So now I'm gonna do, so now that I've done that, I'm gonna go back up here and deal with these two little screws right here. And I call these two screws the twin sisters or whatever, twins, the twin keys right here. I call this upper one, the one higher up on the oboe, screw 7, and the one below it, screw 8. And okay, so let's talk about screw 7 right here. When screw 7, we adjust screw 7 when we're playing a low E. We want to play a low E and then put your ring finger of the right hand on the E key. And then use your middle finger to tap this small key right here. Make sure you don't accidentally hit this trill key. Very lightly tap this. And again, when we tap very lightly, right? To tap this small key above the E key. See, I'm not getting into the technical terms like primary, secondary. I just want to teach you how to do the test and so you can just do it, you know? So yeah, that adjustment is fine, but I just want to make sure it's not too tight. But again, every oboe is different, right? So if you're doing the cigarette paper test, and sometimes this is an area of the oboe where people get messed up a little. There's just so much jam-packed in the mechanism in this part of the oboe that sometimes, you know, it requires slightly different. It's different for different oboes, right? So that's why the playing test is so great in my opinion. So let me see. I'm going to take screw 7 here, the higher of the two sisters, right? The higher of the two twins. And I'm going to just move her, just unscrew her a little bit to the left, right? Loosen her. Loosen the key, screw to the left a little. And it could actually take that, which is interesting. Okay, so let's go too far now. Let's see. Let's unscrew screw 7 a little bit more. So that was too far. I can feel a little buzzing now when I tap that small key. So now I'm going to move it back a little. Just a little bit. Okay? Finding the sweet spot. So I found the sweet spot. Now we're going to move on to screw 8, the screw right underneath screw 7. And what the test we're going to use to check for this screw, this adjustment, is playing a forked F and tapping with our, playing a forked F normally, and then using our middle finger again to tap this small key above the E key, this small key right here, okay? And I'm just going to do the same thing, get it as loose as possible. And I've noticed on this oboe in particular, you see, this is another example of how every oboe is different, right? So you have, the playing test is so helpful with this. With the cigarette test, I used to always adjust this too loose for my oboe, this screw 8 right here. And I guarantee you, when I move this back a little, it's going to wobble. Because this, on my oboe, it just requires that it be a little tighter. Actually, this was okay. I did it a very little bit. So it's still not wobbling yet. But see, it's just, you're focusing on the reality of what you're feeling, right? Instead of speculating. See, like I told you, it's very quick. This specifically on this oboe, not on my other oboes, but on this oboe, not on any of the others I've ever played. On this specific royale, it can't get too loose. It very quickly crosses that threshold. So I'm turning screw 8 to the right a little again, just very little bit, right? We do very little bits. 1 minute on a clock or 2 minutes at a time. Still buzzing and wobbling slightly. So I'm gonna have to screw that again, just a little bit. 1 minute, half a minute. I'm not even doing 1 minute. No, that's fine. I tend to just check these kind of, you know, again at the end, just to make sure. And now I'm going to move on to the low B. Because I already checked the E flat adjustment with the screw 5. When I did screw 5, I checked the low E flat adjustment too and went ahead and did that. So I don't need to do that. That's usually the order, right? But I don't need to, right? Because I already did that. Okay, so let's go on to checking the low B with the C sharp. So and I can feel, because there's a difference in timbre. So you want to play a low B, and then you want to slide to the C sharp and see if the timbre changes at all. If it does, it's probably that is too loose. And I feel just a very small amount. And so you're gonna move down here to where this is the key that opens when you play a C sharp, right? A regular C sharp. You wanna make sure this isn't or this isn't leaking, right? So if you feel a little timbre change on the low B, and this is important for like excerpts like Tombeau, right? Where you have to have your finger on the C, your pinky finger on the C sharp key when you're playing a low B. You want to make sure that that's in place. So I can feel that this is leaking a little actually from this key, right? So I'm going to put it here. This is the screw right here. Just follow the line, right, of the key. And screw it. I'm going to screw it very slightly to the right, right? Okay. Let's see. And now we don't feel a timbre change. So that's all it needed, was that. It was leaking a little bit from the C sharp was leaking a little when I played a low B, and so I had to tighten it a little, correct? So now I feel that viscerally. It's not just something I'm speculating with cigarette tests and whatnot. You feel it. And it feels so much better. The oboe just feels a tremendous amount better because there actually were a few things that need to be sorted. Okay, now let's do the low B and B flat. Oh my goodness, I'm kind of forgetting about this one. So at a certain point, Larrey changed what was the primary and what was the secondary between the B flat key and the B flat hole and the B hole. They changed what was primary or secondary, I think around the R model or something like that. And so I'm actually forgetting. So what do? Trial and error. I remember my friend Gabe also said oh yeah, I just turned this key here until one way. If it gets worse, turn it the other way. And I was like, oh my gosh, same here, because I forgot, it's confusing. This one, because they changed it on the model, they flipped it. So let's see. Let's just play. So now you're just going to play a low B and then a low B flat. And it's okay if you get the C in between it. Ba, yada, 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 yada. And it's okay, that feels pretty okay. But I'm just going to move it. And now, what is the screw that affects this? These two. The relationship of these two. It's actually this screw right here. So what affects it is actually this screw, which is very interesting. Many would not guess this, but it's this screw right here. So I'm just going to move it to the right a little and see what happens. All right. Because I can't remember which way on this Royale. So I moved it to the right a little bit. Let's see how it feels. Well, it feels better. Okay, that's nice. It feels easier. So let me move it to the right a little more, and if it gets worse, then I'll move it back. It feels better. Feels good. Okay, so I'm going to move it to the right more and see if I can go too far. Yeah, I feel it's getting more difficult, so I'm actually going to move it back a little. I went past the point of balance, right? Right, so that feels good. So just go off your feeling, right? What matters is that it needs to feel good, right? So, I haven't even gone over what's the primary, what's the secondary, this and that. I'm just telling you how to do the tests. If you just do this verbatim and follow these, physical observations, your oboe will be in adjustment and it'll feel good. Isn't that all that matters? So now the last test I do is playing a high C sharp And then tapping and making sure, really making sure, you have to make sure, guys, that you do not cover this tiny hole right here. It's very easy to do. It's much easier to do than you would think, even if you think you're not. So be careful. Play the high C sharp. Sorry, that was accidentally that this finger went up a little. Okay, that's why it went up in pitch. That was an accident. But just play the high C sharp and then tap it. Tap the key without covering that microscopic little hole. And now you want to make sure that doesn't make any whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, because the thing is, it'll go sharp. Like, whoa, it'll go sharp. If that has a wobble to it, your C sharp will be very sharp. Okay, and which key is responsible for this? Is this screw right here? This screw that's connected to the C key, the low C key. This screw right here is responsible for that. And this basically, we're checking for the closure of this, right? It's not too much nor too little. Oh, I have water. Oh, well. Okay. So it feels perfectly fine to me. What if I moved it to the left a little? Which would make this key go down a little less far. Let's move it a little to the left. Let's loosen that. See what happens. Because if you have this over tightened, this is the thing. It's a trade-off, right? If you have this over tightened, it will affect your low C, the response of your low C. It'll make your low C a little harder to come out. So you don't want to over tighten it. But I'll show you what happens when it gets under tightened, when it gets too loose. So let's move it a lot, okay? Now I'll show you what happens to the high C sharp. Actually, maybe this was a little over adjusted because it's not wobbling really or going sharp, you know? That feels sharper in pitch to me, you see, because this E key is not going down far enough because I've loosened that little screw. And I just feel it. It's just going sharp a little. It's barely wobbling, but it's going sharp a little. So I'm gonna loosen it even more just to show you how bad it can get. Okay? See how sharp it's feeling? It's because this key is leaking. That'll cause the note to go sharp, obviously, because we're relying on this key going down when we play the high C sharp, right? To help the pitch, right? For it to be the right pitch. And then when we tap that, we're getting a wobble. So, right, we've gone beyond the point of... But the low C comes out so easily because that mechanism is so loose. But we need the best of both worlds. We need our high C sharp to work and we need our low C to not be too resistant, right? So we have to find that balance. So again, it's about finding the perfect balance where the high C sharp comes out and this is going down enough, but it's not over tightened to where the low C then gets impacted. Yeah, it still feels sharp to me. Yeah, it just still is a little bit... I really don't like that high C sharp to feel like it flies away in pitch. So I'm okay with getting the low C out if I put my tongue in the reed before I begin. And get this, maybe if you're playing, you know, second oboe, or you're playing something where you're not playing high C sharps, but you really need your low notes to come out easily, or you don't really care if even, you know, with the high C sharp, you know, then maybe if you really just want your low C and stuff to come out really easily, maybe then you can purposefully adjust it so that the high C sharp is compromised a little bit, but your low C is like really easy, right? So let me try that again though. And the reason I'm doing that chromatic scale going up is because I want to feel the pitch relationship, right? Yeah, it's still a little loose for my taste. I don't want to have to smash down my fingers, right? I don't want to have to smash down the C key either. That's not good for this pad. I want it to kind of go naturally, right? So I think it still needs to be tightened a little. Again, it's this screw. Tighten a little to the right, just slightly. Okay. Yeah, okay. This read's not great, but let's see. Yeah, that's fine, okay? So you just have to play a little and see what's up. And that's fine. I think that's a good balance. So I think that's okay. I think I've struck the balance there, okay? So there we go. And now, just to finish off, sometimes, you know, that took me because I was explaining, it took me so long. Usually I take like 2 minutes to adjust my oboe. So, and I'm very fast with it, but you know, this was just me trying to explain everything. So it took, you know, 38 minutes or whatever it's been. But now I'm gonna go through and just test everything again with the repairman song. See, I told you, sometimes you have to go back and do it again all at the end. Reset the mechanism by just playing again everything through. See, this is a little loose. So I'm going to tighten that a little.